Almost. Major. Holy fucking shit, this is major!
So yeah, which one is the most? That is the most I don't know, fear mongering of them all.
The most fear mongering tech movie.
The net is definitely up there. The internet almost killed Sandra Bullock.
Well, you know what, the one that's the most accurately fearful is Pulse, because literally that movie is log onto the internet once and you got ghosts, and it's just that's it. All he had to do, he put the free AOL trial disc into his computer, and it destroyed everything. And the lesson is never go online.
You're talking about the Kristen Bell one, right? Is that the one you're talking about?
I avoided the original because the Kristen Bell one was so bad, and it scares me like few other films do. I genuinely think Pulse is like one of the best films of the 21st century. It's so fucking terrifying.
That and
relevant.
Yeah, that and Cure are both just like I think both of those, after they were done, like both of them have like the last minute made me be like, I need to rewatch this because I thought that was good, but holy shit. It just, it's like scary and also just very sad at the same time.
Well, the internet's supposed to bring you together, and that's what it's promising, but then it truly makes you feel more isolated. I mean, there are days where I go on fucking Instagram and check stories, and it's basically like, look how great my life is, and then you're like sitting in bed checking them, like, what is my life? Like, or working or something. Like it's funny how like Twitter is a huge dumpster fire of negativity, and like Instagram is like the exact opposite of that, where it's just trying to show how happy or exciting your life is, when in fact both versions can be bad. And I say this as an avid user of both, but I don't know. Do you all have any feelings about them?
Well, and then Facebook is where you buy dirty tables and spread conspiracy theories. But
yeah,
I think it's very interesting how every single like paranoid 90s cyber thriller turned out to be right. They all had it completely right out the gate. You're just like, this is going to be horrible. Like, this is like, people are going to steal your identity. Like, you're going to be like targeted by like shadowy figures. Just, it's a window into abject human misery. We're all on fear.com all the time. And it's just like, they nailed it.
Stephen Dwarf tried to warn us. This is true.
Everyone laughed at him at the time, where it's like, this is absurd. This is ridiculous.
We all log on to see Stephen Ray torture people on live streams.
Yeah. I mean,
wait, is that the premise of Untraceable and Fear.com?
I'm sorry, but like, is that not what happens?
No, I mean, the dark web exists. I mean, Untraceable and Fear.com, yeah. I mean, Fear.com is so fucking convoluted, and I haven't seen that movie in like 10 years. It's fascinatingly bad.
But like, honestly, like, this is like way too morbid for like off the gate, but just think about
hell yeah, let's go.
Like, we've all seen videos of people getting killed on the internet.
Well, I remember
it's happened.
The big thing and when I was like coming of age was do any of you, and this was a Canadian thing too, do you remember Luca Magnotta, the guy who like was like the ice pick killer?
Oh, I think I remember.
He like
him, yeah.
chopped up like an exchange student and like was like,
yes,
and then like
yes.
like it got posted online. People were like seeing it and like watching it on like the video, and then like eventually he got like nabbed in like an internet cafe in Europe or something like that. But that was like a huge thing, and I remember that was like, we had newspapers in like in my school, and like it was a Christian elementary school, and I remember like the teacher like saying like just to kids like, don't read the story. It's like, oh well, too late. I read it at home. But but yeah, no, I remember that story being really freaky. In terms of like watching stuff on the internet. Not to make this like too intense, but yeah.
The thing I keep kind of going back to and thinking about is eventually, at what point does just like neo-Luddites like emerge that are just like rabidly anti-technology, and going into like McDonald's and ripping out like the automated menus and stuff like that to get put in there. Like I just feel like we've already seen it with people like burning down 5G towers. Like I think that like the 5G conspiracy is a little bit of an extension of that, and I think like we're just gonna like just slowly emerge where everyone just gets so fed up with all this stuff that there's just a sect of people that are just anti-technology is just a theological drive.
Yeah, it just need one
sentence. Sorry.
Yes. It just takes one person to guest on Joe Rogan to say that, and it'll become a movement.
Anyone remember that tweet that was like, I accidentally airdropped Big Chungus into like the cafe's desktop, and now I have to pretend that I don't know what's happening? Like, even like accidental shit like that is hilarious.
I think the bigger question is, at what point does like a picture of Big Chungus accidentally gets sent to like Vladimir Putin's email, and that just like starts a war? I think that's the real question. Is it's going to be Big Chungus?
Yeah. He thinks it's American propaganda and that he is Big Chungus, and then he gets offended.
There's also that really funny Onion News Network sketch where it's like like ISIS sent out like huge terrorist attack of cute photo of Piglet in boots. And it's just like, and then like to try and retort, I think they do like a jiggly nude old woman or something like that, and then it was just like, but then they found that even funnier, and then this woman sent it to everyone she was on the PTA with 6 months ago. Like, it's just so good.
But speaking of like rabid technology sex, I feel like that goes into the movie we're here to talk about.
Yes, we are talking about Johnny Mnemonic today.
Yes, hell yes.
I still
Heroin
haven't seen
dolphins.
I didn't do my homework.
There's not much indie tech movies. I feel like it's a Columbia TriStar mid-90s. They were just like, Johnny Mnemonic, do it. Well, Hackers MGM, but the net, I forget who put it, but it was all on a studio. I feel like producers and studio heads were just like, bring me all the tech scripts you got, and we need to make them.
Well, now they get like laughed off because like now I don't even remember if any of you remember the movie Disconnect. All I remember from that movie
people
is
thought
I mean,
it was
it's
terrible.
basically
Yeah.
Oh yeah, well it is terrible. It's Crash but for the internet, and it ends with a big like all the three main stories like interlock in a slow motion climax, which involves Jason Bateman whacking a child in the head with a hockey stick in slow motion.
Huh.
It's certainly worth looking up, because I remember I was in the theater by myself and I was like cackling to myself and felt so rude, but I was just like, how are we supposed to take this seriously even in like 2012? Like,
I mean, people like it's just they were the movie I think of what I thought you were going to talk about with like sort of paranoid like tech movies that get laughed off I think when they're released, but there's like a critical community or like a group of critics that like them is the Unfriended movies, where people were like saying, "Oh, yes. It's the internet that kills you." Oh, like I remember kids like that I went to high school with like laughing at it, and now there are people who are reappraising it. And I'll even admit, like I saw Unfriended Dark Web in theaters, and look, I'm sure that movie is silly, but like while you're watching it in the moment, or while I was watching the moment, I did like get like a pit in my stomach at like some of those scenarios. Like it's really unnerving, some of the stuff that happens just on a visceral level. Maybe it's not I'm not gonna get dark web someday, but it's
right.
I thought it was weird how everyone just like was praising Host when that came out a couple years ago, pretending as if like Unfriended didn't already happen and didn't do everything in Host like 10 times better, which it was a kind of scrappy independent feature, sure, but I was just like, everyone was acting as if Unfriended didn't happen.
Yeah, I think it was the quarantine of it all being shot so fast and then put on Shudder. But yeah, I hate Unfriended, but then I was like, well,
really,
I was like, I guess I'll try Dark Web. It can't be that much worse. And I was like, this is actually really good.
Yeah, and I think Dark Web is much better than the first one. I need to see the first one again. I remember Dark Web came out the same year as Searching with John Cho, and Dark Web uses. I really don't get the love for that movie, because it's like it's the type of thing where the camera is the desktop, but then it'll like zoom in on a particular part of the desktop, and I'm kind of like, but like Dark Web has like immaculate little details of like what other browsers are open or like what's on their desktop to kind of give you an idea as to who these or the main person is on the Skype chat or something, where I feel like searching just doesn't trust you enough and has to like zoom in on like a document or a photo.
Yeah,
and
I was
just
afraid
kinda like,
of its own concept.
Yeah. John Cho is innocent. He's really good in that movie, but I was kind of like, wait, Unfriended Dark Web was getting shit on like 6 months ago, and this is what people are praising? Like,
It's also like, it's also just a bad mystery on top of everything. Like, it's not a well-constructed mystery, but then it's just like, it doesn't even have the audacity to just commit to its desktop film concept. It has to keep being like, well, let's watch this news clip. Like, let's watch this, because it's just, it gets so afraid of the idea that like you could just be engaged watching a computer screen, which I think is just like an absolutely fascinating image. Is just computer screens.
Yeah.
And if they weren't, like, that's the thing, is there's all these films out there that are very focused on trying to make, computers seem more exciting than they are. Like, they're very afraid of just showing like a hacker writing actual code. They have to always show some sort of like crazy 3D, like I'm hacking into the system, and then it's all these flashing colors, and it's like it's pretty much like they're playing Doom in order to crack the code.
That would be awesome, though.
But think about it, if computers were not inherently interesting to look at, would we be spending like 90% of our waking hours these days looking at them?
That's true.
Like, if there wasn't something inherently interesting about the interface.
Slightly off topic, but I also just thought of like, I don't know if any of you saw, I completely forgot about this movie until it just popped back into my brain just now, but I don't know if any of you saw Open Windows with my boyfriend Elijah Wood in it. And there's a sequence where Elijah Wood has to like leave, he has to get out of the hotel room or wherever he is, and he takes his laptop with him and puts it in the passenger seat of a car and then has a car chase, and I'm like, the signal would be fucking lost as soon as you left that hotel room. Like, that doesn't even make it.
If the hotel has no Wi-Fi and he was using his phone as a hotspot.
It wasn't his phone, it was a laptop, and it was like 2013, and on top of that, it was like, you're not even, to get what Brad was saying, like, car chases can be boring just in general, so like, having it through the passenger seat of just Elijah Wood just being like, like, narrowly, like, avoiding, like, traffic or something, I'm just like, what the fuck is this? Like, anyway.
Yeah, I'll probably watch it. Yeah.
That's not good.
That hasn't stopped me before. Anyways, this is Almost Major, where we cover the many major studios and the films they release. We are still on Artisan. Today we are doing Pi from 1998. My name is Kevin Tudor. I'm here with Charlie Nash.
Hello.
And Bryden Doyle.
Hey.
And we have a special guest, the tech extraordinaire himself. What's the Twitter account? It's Cinema Interface, is it?
Oh, yeah, at Cinema Interface.
Brad Avery.
Hello.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm no one special.
Okay, and Pi? No.
Yeah, no, I'm do film reviews from time to time. I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association alongside Charlie. Known Charlie for a long time, for Charlie's former roommate. So there's that. And yeah, and so I've also just came on for Pi because it seemed opportune. Just sort of been doing this hobby project for a little while called Cinema Interface, where I'm just kind of collecting computer screens from movies and TV and just showcasing them. And it's just sort of for fun, and it's just sort of a Twitter account, but that's sort of my tie-in for why I wanted to talk about this movie in particular. When you were like, hey, do you want to do something? Here's a list of films, and this was the one that definitely jumped out to me, and also because I always remembered liking it a lot, and wanted a chance to revisit it as well.
I think we brought up Cinema Interface. If it wasn't the last episode, it was the one before that, because we were talking about SwimFan, and we were hoping that you posted a screenshot of the computer in SwimFan.
I did.
And yes, you did. We were very happy about that. There's our SwimFan reference for the episode. No more.
It all comes back to SwimFan.
It does.
And we usually like to ask our guests too, like if you have any special association with Artisan Entertainment. Do you remember like any movies of theirs that you remember seeing like the logo in, or just like a movie that sticks out of theirs in particular?
No. I mean, I've obviously seen some of the movies, but I didn't really think about Artisan until you guys mentioned that you were doing it as the first studio to cover for the show, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, like I guess I know some of these films, but it's yeah. So I can't really say I have a particular attachment with the studio, other than having seen a handful of the films, but it doesn't really invoke the nostalgia or the like, oh shit, I'm gonna like see something interesting, the way like the Canon logo coming up before a movie does, or or the nostalgia of like a TriStar Pictures logo or something like that.
Yeah, and it's interesting too that you mentioned like the logos. I mean, the funny thing about watching some of these movies, I mean, with Pi in particular, is like I watched it on YouTube for free, but like they now have like updated it so that it's the Lionsgate logo. It's not Artisan even, because like it was absorbed into Lionsgate, or Lionsgate bought it, But like it's now Lionsgate, and it's just like, so like a lot of like movies have like sort of erased that association with Artisan. But then like you have a few where it's like they weren't able to get rid of it or whatever, and it's like, okay, well.
Right.
They did the same thing with Requiem.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting choice that you did for the first one. Like obviously I know there's like a good handful of like pretty fascinating movies in it, that they put out, and a lot of crap as well, as you've been covering. But it's like, I don't know. I guess to me, it's like it's not one I've ever really thought about in any serious way. And it's like, oh yeah, they became Lionsgate, and that was kind of their story. But it is sort of just sort of a bit of that whole kind of tail end of the Sundance era of the 90s, giving way into how film evolved over the 2000s. So I think, like, I don't know, to me the most interesting story about Artisan is the fact that they had the Marvel rights, and were supposed
just
to do a whole
squandered
ton of
it.
Marvel movies. Just sat on it, let it slip by, got acquired, gave up on it, sold them off.
Right.
That's the most interesting thing, is the thing that didn't happen. It's really the what could have been.
Right, and I can't wait to talk about that on our Punisher episode, because then you also get into Sony could have bought all of the rights to all of the Marvel characters for movies for like $50 million, and they're just like, no, we only want Spider-Man. Like, we'll pay $40 million just for Spider-Man. We don't want all these dumb other characters.
Have you talked about this yet on the show?
No.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll let you get deep into it on the Punisher episode, but basically the short of it is, Artisan had around 2000, after Blade happened, and like right around when X-Men was being made, they acquired the rights for like a good like 15 or so, something estimated, Marvel characters, including Captain America and Thor, Black
And
Panther.
Deadpool.
They were supposed to do a Black Panther with Wesley Snipes, and then they had some like other beat ones. Like I was curious. There's a character named Mort, the dead teenager, that is honestly the one Marvel movie you could maybe get me to see these days. If like, I'm curious, what's Mort, the dead teenager about? Okay. But yeah, I again, that's the most interesting story. Whereas like, I'm excited to see the future of the show too, because I think there's some like real crazy ones. Like Canon obviously is just a roller coaster ride of just like, not even the movies. Like, just even if the movies were not as insane as they are, it would still just be the story of Menahem Golan and Globus is just like absolute nuts. Just fraud and just crazy Israelis trying to make it in Hollywood. That's a really good story. So I think it's that's sort of my I'm looking forward to when you do that series.
Yeah, and it's also funny because you were mentioning that, and Artisan's last movie is Man-Thing, so that's pretty much the only, that and Punisher were the only ones they made through the Marvel, and Man-Thing was supposed to come out in 2003, and then it just premiered on the Sci-Fi Network in like 2005, and that ended up being the last Artisan movie. Unfortunately, can't cover that because it's direct DVD, but I think we'll be fine. But yes, today we are talking about Pi from 1998. This is actually Artisan's first movie. It premiered at Sundance January 1998, where they picked it up and released it in the U.S. January 10th, 1998. It went up to 68 theaters. The number one movie that week when it was released was Lethal Weapon 4, so yeah. Number two is Armageddon, Small Soldiers, Dr. Dolittle, and Mulan, so it had some competition.
Set the world on fire.
Yeah. The budget was around $60,000 for production, and then $68,000 for post production. I only put the post production because like it's so indie that like so much of that detail is out.
A lot of the money was just spent on blowing it up to 35 millimeter.
Yeah, and like sound design and whatnot. And then through the commentary of Aronofsky, it said that in the European version it has "Angel" by Massive Attack during a scene, and it's still in the credits, but it's actually not in the movie.
I was so annoyed when I found that out. I was like waiting to think, where is this song? Because like Angel's like one of my favorite songs, and then like it's on the soundtrack. It makes me think. I mean, I feel like I've seen this before. It's like music inspired by the film. Like, is it like? Do you think maybe they had it? Like, it's like, oh, this is like kind of like fitting like sort of like the electronic music vibe of like the whole movie. Like that sort of like very like ominous sort of tone. I don't know, but also like kind of like a cool beats. I don't know. Or maybe they had it.
And then it became the house theme.
Oh yeah, there's a certain part where it kind of sounds like the instrumental at the very start of Angel, but I doubt it. But it could just, that's a very minimalist beat at the start. It could be really anything. But yeah, because I remember looking that up, and I was like, last time I watched it, I do not remember that song being in there. And yeah, he said he didn't specify, but he just said, yeah, on the overseas it has "Angel" by Massive Attack, so I don't know what's up with that.
It's just funny too, because like that song's in so many movies from this era, like Go, Best Laid Plans, Antitrust.
Yes,
you know, it's like and like speaking of other ridiculous tech thrillers, I mean, it's like it's just funny how like it's like so many people were using it, and like it's like, oh, okay. I guess Aronofsky maybe didn't have the money, or like I wonder if like maybe they had it in like Sundance or something, like maybe when it played at the fest or something, because this was a Sundance movie, right? I mean,
that's definitely happened before, because when I saw Boyhood at South by Southwest, they had different needle drops by the time it came out.
Yeah, I assume when it played at Sundance, it only had the Clint Mansell score, and then when Artisan bought it, was just like, okay, here's some money for post-production, you can put like a few songs, you can make the sound better, etc. Similar things happened to Clerks. Clerks had like no soundtrack, and then when Miramax bought it, they were just like putting an entire soundtrack on it, and etc. But domestic gross was 3.2 million, worldwide is 4.6 million.
It's interesting. So it's the first film of Darren Aronofsky, you know, who obviously has gone on to be sort of a major auteur of the 2000s, you know, Requiem for a Dream, The Wrestler, Black Swan, you know, and this is his first film. So Aronofsky, you know, he's from New York, you know, didn't have the film industry connections growing up, but he went to Harvard, where he made his first student short, Supermarket Sweep, which I think starred the star of Pi.
Yeah, Sean Gillette.
Yeah.
And then he went and studied at the AFI, the American Film Institute, and made a number of short films there. But Pi is his first feature, and so you mentioned it's a $60,000 budget. And I was, you know, I prepare for this reading a bunch of contemporary interviews. There's actually a very useful, I think it's a fan site, but it's like a tripod website for just all about Aronofsky, that like last updated like around 2006. And
Hell yeah.
Yeah, it's totally Web 1.0, and it has like a bunch of links to old interviews from, you know, for Pi, Requiem, and for The Fountain. So I was looking around there. So basically he basically just sort of begged and scraped to get the budget together, and he took out like got a bunch of people to just loan him $100, anyone he could, just like, give me $100, and he sort of built the money up that way through these micro loans, and then found an actual producer to sort of, you know, top off the rest. And then he got his crew to work for free, but basically he says everyone from the PA to the producers agreed to just take an equal share of the profit of the film. So everyone has an equal stake in the film. So when you're saying, you know, this film was made for $60K and then grossed, you know, over 4.2 million, something like that, you know, theoretically, all of that, it was divided evenly between every single person who worked on the film. So not a bad deal,
right?
In the end. It premiered at Sundance in '98 and won Aronofsky the Best Director prize, which sort of set him up. The screening was attended by Bill Block, executive from Live Entertainment, which between the acquisition and the film going out into distribution, rebranded as Artisan, and it was acquired for $1 million, I believe.
Yep.
So there was it was $1 million deal. It was a huge benefit. One of the interviews, sort of Aronofsky mentions that, like, kind of going into the festival, the big buzz was like, Vincent Gallo was there with, I think, Buffalo 66 was like the big movie that everyone thought was like, oh, this is the one. Smoke Signals, which is a very good movie.
Yep.
If you guys haven't seen it, was another one he mentioned sort of being the buzz. But then Pie screens, they get the standing ovation, and it suddenly just a narrative shifts, and it becomes one of the awards front runners, and it sets him up. And out of Sundance, he also gets like a $600,000 deal with Dimension to write and direct a
Below.
Well, it was called Proteus at the time, and it was his idea for like a World War II submarine horror movie.
Yeah.
That at some point, basically, he didn't wind up directing it. It got made as Below, directed by the dude who did the Riddick movies.
David Twovey.
And,
Have you seen
yeah.
Below?
Yeah.
Has anyone seen Below except me?
No, I haven't. I'm gonna.
Seems like a whatever movie
It's
to me, but
fine. It's just very funny that like Aronofsky. I mean, like it sounds like he wrote that like or had writing credit on before like a lot of his big hits. But it's very funny that that's like after Requiem for a Dream. It comes out. It says written by Darren Aronofsky and these other people. It's like that's very funny to me that that's like. The way it comes to the chronology of his career, that comes after Requiem for a Dream. I just think that's very funny, but yeah.
He's talking about doing Requiem though in '98. Like in the interviews, he's like saying my next project's going to be an adaptation of Requiem for a Dream. So that was already in the works. Anyway, all that to say, big classic '90s Sundance story
Beautiful.
that just establishes a career of a very significant director today. Although I don't know, I kind of feel like he's dropped off in the past few years. I think Mother kind of put a nail in the coffin for him.
I don't know.
I mean, the pandemic is also probably not like great for a lot of filmmakers. It's been like 5 years since that came out, so maybe when's his new movie supposed to come out? The one about the whale.
Brendan Fraser.
Yeah, that's supposed to come out this year. Okay, so like 5 years. That's like not as bad as like some filmmakers who take like 10 or 20 years hiatuses.
I mean, in between Requiem and Fountain, I think that was 6 years. But he was also going to make the Batman movie, so that's what slowed him down. I think
that fell apart.
Yeah,
So.
He's definitely become more divisive as time has gone on. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, go ahead. Sorry, Brad.
I was just gonna say, I feel like around the time of The Wrestler and Black Swan was he really had that, like, I hate to use the term, but like the film bro type of energy. Like it was it was very much sort of a like that type of film fan who was also say like into Tarantino and Christopher Nolan, and he was kind of in that category, I think. And again, because he kind of made like head trip movies,
right?
And those are the types of things that are very flashy and appealing. And he had a lot of cred there. And then I think Noah came out and kind of people were a little disappointed with it. It was weird. And then Mother came out, and he's only been doing a movie like every 3 or 4 years, and it's like a 5-year gap. So he's just sort of been sinking away in terms of like how frequent his output is on top of it. So I think there's a bit of that. It just sort of feels like he's no longer quite as revered as he was, but he could always bound to come back.
We're not going to be talking about this movie, and I haven't seen it yet, but The Fountain, I'm looking at like not to like say Rotten Tomatoes is the end all be all for like movies predictions, but it looks like that one is like kind of divisive. That's what I heard the reception on. And that's in between Requiem and The Wrestler.
I love that movie, and it's but it is like I guess what it does not play well to conventional moviegoers, which is why I think it was so divisive at the time, still is so divisive. Because I remember when The Fountain came out, and like me and everyone from high school who loved Requiem for a Dream were like, oh my god, the new movie, and I was like the one person in my high school who like adored that movie. But it is I think the thing about Darren Aronofsky movies that ultimately wins me over as an apologist of his is his movies don't behave, really. Like whether or not you like him or not, you can always tell when you're watching one of his movies.
Oh yeah.
So I think that, and the fact that he has been such a blunt, visceral filmmaker who literally will not, he's relentless in basically every single one of his movies, which is another reason why I think The Fountain and Noah didn't do as well as the other ones. I mean, because he actually is kind of, I don't want to say calm down, but he definitely restrains himself a little bit. The Wrestler, even, I think that was the one where it put him back on the map, because The Wrestler and Black Swan were supposed to be
Oscar movies.
one movie.
Oh yeah.
Well, they were
Big
supposed to be
Oscar
one
movies,
movie about two artists who can't separate themselves from their own physical performances. And what's so funny is that The Wrestler is like the most realistic film he's ever made, and then Black Swan is like such a gorgeously trashy, De Palma film in its own way.
Yeah.
Like, it's just totally ridiculous. But I think that he's always been obsessed with, or he's always been fascinated by people who are obsessed with one thing and acquiring this one thing, and that it drives them to madness or their own self-destruction. And sometimes it's worth it for them, so other times it's not. I mean, I think that and as someone who was like a depressed teenager in the 2000s, I think that like there was something about his films that still resonate with me, about just being, his characters are so passionate about this one thing that they are hoping to achieve, or just going into psychological hell that is weirdly cathartic in a way, because I guess I hope that wasn't word salad, but I hope that what I'm trying to say
definitely.
is like he's not for everybody, and he's bludgeoning, but like, and he's always over the top, but
I find that he also tends to like draw very strong reactions one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And like we'll get, like, we're going to talk about Requiem later, so like you'll know that we have very strong differing opinions on that, but on that movie. But like I also find it with like Mother, where like Charlie, I know you and I both saw that together and like loved it, and I still stand by that movie. But like,
oh, me too.
I talk to people who are like, they don't just like dislike it, they like viscerally
they loathe
hate it. Like
it.
people like get mad at me for like saying I think it's good. Like it's weird. Like he does inspire that, like one way or the other usually. Like it's most of the time. Most of his movies have like a very strong visceral reactions.
I have a friend our friend Kristen, anytime we get in a debate about a movie and I'm like sort of like proving a point, she'll be like, Charlie, you like Mother.
Yes, and
yeah.
I'm like,
like a
seriously,
trump
people
card.
get like mad when I'm just,
No,
like,
they
I
do.
think Mother's good, and they're just like, I loathe that movie. It's like it's very weird. Like it's like very few movies that like do that, where like it's not even like willing to entertain that like there's something there, or like that I see something in it. It's like, I don't know. It's interesting.
I think it's also because sorry.
I think it's definitely. It's like I appreciate that's there. That there's still something that like still movies that can be made that can just like invoke that level of divisiveness, and it's not even like the same level of like bad discourse that happens online now about every single movie. It's like it's a true sort of like reaction to the film.
Yeah, I would rather that than people just be like, yeah, it was good. Oh, he made another movie. Yeah, it was good. Yeah.
I mean, with Mother, I feel like I remember hearing people at the time talking about how that was like it could be seen as like a religious allegory, and like then like Noah was the one that people really got up in arms about. I remember like I went to a Christian high school, and I remember people like being like the rock monsters and everything, and the story of Noah and the ark and everything. Yeah. I remember like bringing that up in a debate, and someone saying like, well, I don't know, I saw Noah, and I don't remember there being rock monsters in the Bible or whatever, and I was like, okay, sorry. Like,
I almost feel like Mother is a reaction to all the negative reviews.
It
towards
definitely
Noah.
is.
I mean, it's such a middle finger of a movie, which is
I
I think why it. Oh.
No,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I shouldn't have interrupted you. I was just like, I really need to see Noah, because like I think
that's the only one I haven't seen. Yeah,
but
it's probably my least favorite of his films, but it's fascinating. I mean, it's clearly messy and compromised, but it's not. There's not nothing there. It is a weird one.
I'm just riffing. Like I should really like read more into it. I am curious to read some more like Jewish reactions to Noah than like Christian reactions, because I think that might be possible divide. I, having not seen the movie and just kind of like, but based on Pi and based on just what I know about Aronofsky, very curious if part of the divide comes from like with Christian viewers, like you're saying, Bryden, where like, I don't remember that in the Bible.
Yeah.
And, you know, elements of like not even like Jewish mysticism, which comes up a lot in Pi that we'll talk about. Like, you know, Pi's very interested in Kabbalah and in a lot of, you know, in Hasidic beliefs and sort of you know, Jewish mythology as well. So like rock monsters, I'm like, well, so you mean like a golem?
In regards to the rock monsters, I think it was it's jarring in that movie because it's not an action movie at all, and then that sequence kind of comes out of nowhere and makes it feel much more mainstream in a way that's like, oh, like this is kind of feeling like producers like poking at him to make this into the movie because they're like, we don't want people to get bored. You know, it feels more conventional than anything he's ever done, which is weird because it's a movie about Noah. But you know.
Right. As we were saying, of course, written and directed by Darren Aronofsky. This is his first movie. But we were talking about he does have a few shorts from 1991 to 1994. The story is amalgamation of Darren Aronofsky, Sean Gillette, and Eric Watson, the producer. We were saying that he won the Dramatic Directing Award at Sundance in 1998 and Best First Screenplay at the Spirit Awards in 1999. This stars Sean Gillette as Max. Prior to this, he was in Aronofsky's short Supermarket Sweep in 1991. This is his first feature film role. After this, he plays Arnold the Shrink in Requiem for a Dream, and he wrote and directed a film called Traitors in 2013. Mark McGilla as Saul. Prior to this, he was in Scarface. He's the guy that is about to explode the bomb with the kids and the mother in the car, and then Tony shoots him. He's in the Cotton Club, and after this, he's in every single one of Aronofsky's movies besides Mother. And of course, recently he played Hector on Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. Ben Shankman as Lenny. This is one of his first roles. After this, he plays a doctor in Requiem for a Dream and also plays a doctor in Blue Valentine.
He's also in Roger Dodger, which we talked about.
Right.
He's one of the guys that Campbell Scott works with. Yeah.
Yes. Campbell Mitchell. Trivia. We talked about Artisan buying it. Allegedly, this is the first movie made available to download online legally. So cool. Backstories for the character Max and Saul were conceived by Sean Gillette and Darren Aronofsky, but they were never written for the film. They would have been about Max proving to be a math prodigy at a very young age and soon attending Columbia, where he met Saul, a Russian teacher who was captured by American forces and was given the chance to assist in the building of nuclear weapons. Because of his great math prowess, he refused and relocated to Siberia, where he was soon let out and acquired a job teaching math at Columbia University. If given a closer look at Saul's wrist, prison tats can be seen. No location permits were secured for any of the scenes filmed. The crew had to have one man constantly serving as a lookout for police so they could stop filming if needed. The subway scenes were illegally filmed to save $18,000 a night. And I forget which commentary it was, if it was Aronofsky or Gillette's commentary, but they were talking about the scene where the brain is on the steps. The person that was lookout, she was like trying to distract Aronofsky and was just like, when's the next train to Coney Island? And he was like, what? Why are you talking about this? And apparently a cop showed up, and the cop just looked at the brain, looked at them filming, and left. And apparently the reason that the cop didn't do anything is because Woody Allen was also shooting a movie around that area, so the cop thought that they were just involved in that movie and didn't bring it up. So yeah, this is Clint Mansell's first score. He's gone on to score all of Aronofsky's subsequent films besides Mother. And that's really all the trivia I have right now. There's some more that I learned from the commentary that I'll bring up while we're talking about it.
"1245. Restate my assumptions. 1. Mathematics is the language of nature. 2. Everything around us can be represented and understood through numbers. 3. If you graph the numbers of any system, patterns emerge. Therefore, there are patterns everywhere in nature."
You ever hear of Kabbalah? Jewish mysticism. Insomnia haunts him and he twists and turns in his bed.
Maybe that pattern is like the pattern in the stock market. The Torah. This 216 number.
This is insanity, Max.
Or maybe it's genius. I have to get that number.
Hold on, you have to slow down. You're losing it.
You only gave us part of the code. Now give us the rest of the code so we can set it right.
You are only a vessel from our God. You are carrying a delivery that was meant for us. There will be no order, only chaos.
First thoughts, initial thoughts, what do we got? We've all seen this previously, but on this rewatch, what did everybody think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an excellent movie. I mean, I realize that like we're pretty deep into this episode. We haven't really discussed what the movie's about, so I'm hoping everyone listening has like seen it before.
Oh,
We get into spoilers. Like, we don't hold back.
Yeah.
Yeah, but well, I'm just like realizing like we haven't talked about what the movie's about. Basically, Sean Guillet plays a man named Max Cohen. He's kind of a mathematical genius. Can do complicated equations in his head. Basically, he's working on a computer program trying to sort of solve the stock market. He believes that there's a way to predict how the market's going to go, and you can use that to become rich. But he's a bit reclusive, lives by himself in an apartment that's just sort of completely overrun with machinery and his own sort of special power source for his computers. And this code that he's working on is incredibly complex. And he becomes obsessed with it, and so he also basically his only friend really that he sees is his old professor who he plays the game Go, the board game Go with, who tend to discuss mathematics, and the professor had been working on the same problem before him, but had a stroke, and so is sort of housebound now, and but basically people catch wind of what he's working on and want to basically control him for their own purposes. The first is a Hasidic Jew in his neighborhood in New York named Lenny, who meets him at a diner and approaches him and starts kind of explaining Kabbalah to him, which in the most basic terms is sort of a Jewish mysticism that applies a lot of value to numbers, and specifically, ascribing specific numbers to Hebrew characters, and finding the connections there. For example, I think one of the examples is that the symbol for the character for father and mother add up to equal the character for children. Stuff like that, and it kind of relates back to God and sort of solving sort of the problem of the meaning of life and the true name of God and these things. And so this Hasidic Jew Lenny is trying to get Max Cohen, very obviously Jewish, into to kind of come study Torah with me, and and then there's also a woman who works for a Wall Street firm who offers Max a very high-powered computer chip that could help him perhaps crack his algorithm, but obviously, going for the money that can be made by basically, hacking the stock market for the most part, and controlling the knowledge of where stocks are going to go. So it's a very sort of paranoid thriller. The whole thing is shot in a high contrast black and white. It was shot on black and white reversal film, 16 millimeter, that gives it this very stark look. Again, reading the Aronofsky interviews, he keeps saying again and again, I didn't want it to look like Clerks, which is gray. I want it to look black and white. And visually, it has a very
love the way Clerks looks.
Yeah, it has a very specific. It harkens back to the films of Shinya Tsukamoto, Tetsuo the Iron Man, which Aronofsky acknowledged as an influence, but also he specifically mentioned Frank Miller's comics, so the Sin City comics. It's sort of where Miller would draw white on black ink.
It almost looks milky, and I mean that as a compliment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It almost looks like wet, if that makes any sense, which it adds to... Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. It's just, no. I agree with you. Yeah.
And there's like computers everywhere that give it, like, all the wiring gives it this very sort of dystopian mechanical feel as well.
Yeah, I adore the way this movie looks. I wish there were more movies. The only thing that I can think of is Clerks, but that's just black and white and it's low budget, so it kind of looks that way. It's not a cinematic decision. It's just that's what they shot.
What about
it
Belfast?
Okay, all right. Well, Brad,
Everyone's trying to do
Brad,
black
Brad,
and
do you
white
want
movies. Like,
Brad? Do
barely
you want to
one.
take over Charlie's position on the show? We got to get him out of here.
I haven't seen Belfast.
Yeah, no.
This is the Belfast fan club now, and Charlie,
Belcast.
you're banned for having not
Belfast.
seen.
You don't have to ban me. I will leave.
But yeah, like the documentary Dark Days gives me a similar feeling to Pi, just how messy that black and white looks and how dark it feels. But yeah, it's just it doesn't look like anything I've ever seen before. Besides Tetsuo, like I just love that you wouldn't even be able to try to make a movie that looks like this. It has to be, you know, something this independent, and it's like he was able to use a reversal film, which he said was a headache to use and it was really hard to use, but that's what he wanted to use.
It was expensive too.
Right, which you would think like if he was doing it on very low budget, he would just get whatever he wanted, but I'm glad that he was able to use it because it looks phenomenal. But Bryden, I think you were trying to say that you had never seen it before when I said that everybody had seen it.
Yes, I had never seen this one. I'd seen other Aronofsky movies. I'd seen Black Swan, Mother, and Requiem for a Dream. But this one I think I maybe was holding off on because like I wasn't as wild about those ones on my initial views. But Pi I was quite taken with. It's definitely a very striking debut, and I think I like it because it is pretty in your face with like all like the screechy sort of like constantly like sort of scratchy electronic score and like the really screechy sound design and like the really like increasingly manic performances. And like you're right about like the look of this movie, and it's Matthew Libatique who shoots I think almost all of Aronofsky's movies except for The Wrestler. Incredible cinematographer.
Yeah, weirdly.
Incredible cinematographer in kind of a bad situation right now legally, if you look more into that. It looks like the movie's like always about to like the movie could like rupture, like the film could just like burn up at any moment because like it looks like the frame's all like kind of jittery, which like really like places you in the headspace of the character. And I think that's why I like the look of this movie and like its in your face camera techniques and editing choices more than something like Requiem for a Dream, where I feel like it is just like that one's more, I mean, not to spoil my thoughts on that movie before we talk about it, but I feel like that movie it's more just like him showing off and like just like doing a lot of editing, whereas I feel like this is more like subjective camera work and editing. It like really places you in this like increasingly frayed mental state of this character. And I also think it is kind of funny too, like in places. Like the movie does have a sense of humor about itself where like this guy like doesn't really know how to connect with people, and like his like there's like a very blatant like sexual arousal he gets like from like working with his computer, where like you hear like a woman's moaning and like it's like super, and like there's like an image of like I'm trying to remember what it is. I wrote it down, but yeah, you superimpose like a woman's lips over the shot of the computer, and like as the moaning is like rising, like it cuts to black, and he's like, "Shit, damn it!" and like he yells and everything. It's like the delayed sexual gratification, like from him working on his computer. Like I just find that connection very funny, and also like the idea of like I don't know. I think it's interesting. Like I don't know. I don't know I don't know a whole lot about Aronofsky's personal life and everything, but I do feel like I think it, and like whether he's like a very egotistical director and everything, but I think it's very funny how this movie is like him like this guy thinking he's like the chosen one, and it's like, well, no, like and then like him saying no, I am the chosen one, even when he's told that he's not or whatever, for like I am the one who's going to fulfill this purpose, and then like he ends up like drilling it into his head to like stop his madness and everything. I just think it's kind of like a funny subversion.
It's like he is the one. When he's surrounded by the Hasidic Jews, he wants to be the one and be like, I'm the one that was chosen, not you guys. But then when it's not around other people, he just wishes he was not the one, to the point where he literally, like drills himself in the head so he can stop obsessing about it. Because the parts with the moaning and whatnot, that's his next door neighbor and whatnot. And I always think that's just him being so involved with the computers and the stock market and all the numbers and whatnot, that it's like that what maybe I should be doing. Like being with somebody else, but I can't think about other people besides my work and Saul, who is an extension of my work. Everybody else is just an obstacle in the way, you know.
Or the walls are really thin in his apartment, and that neighbor's fucking a whole lot.
Maybe
It's
that.
New York, so probably.
Yeah.
It's a really strong performance from Sean. Is it Gillette or Gillette? I always
He
wanna
says
pronounce it.
It's
Gillette.
Gillette.
He says
was born in
Gillette. Okay.
Boston. I don't think it's like, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
But it's a really strong performance from him. He's basically playing this, you know, total paranoiac character who, it's like, you know, he's very kind of clearly implied to, you know, be neurodivergent, and he's you know, sort of socially stunted, I guess you could say, where he struggles to connect with other people. So he's always kind of you know, just focused maddening on this algorithm that he's trying to crack, and it almost seems like it's one of those things where the problem becomes, it's less about the final outcome. Like, you don't really get a sense that this guy wants to be rich, like that he's like, oh, I'm going to be so filthy rich once I figure out the stock market. It's really just like, it's the idea of cracking it that is like the thing that compels him. And he is compelled. He's absolutely just like maniacally focused on this one thing. And that's sort of the running theme throughout Aronofsky's career, is characters who are just like maniacally focused and obsessed with certain things, whether, you know, whatever it be.
It's kind of interesting how Mother is the most divisive of his films, because it's the one character, the main protagonist of that is the one who's just loving and supporting the person who is trying to reach that nirvana of like literary appraisal. And for whatever reason, that's the one. I mean, for many reasons, people don't like that movie, but I do think it's interesting that, like, yeah, almost all of his protagonists are manic obsessive to some extent, and Mother is the one where she's just like, I just want to be stable and have a nice house with a husband, and the husband is the one that ultimately causes everything, and she's the innocent bystander in it all. So
I want to say a couple of things to that. One, I feel that's interesting that you point out, Brad, that like the character is neurodivergent. I hope I wasn't like coming off like insensitively about the character and talking about like their mania in the movie as like they're really becoming more obsessed with the thing.
It's all there.
No, it's
all
definitely
there.
hard.
yeah, it's all there.
No, it's like, you're watching a movie and you're like, okay, he's you know, like you get that sense from the character very like out the gate, and then it's, you know, but it doesn't mean that he can't, you know, go completely insane.
Right.
Which he does by the end, and he's, you know, he's you know, there's seeing hallucinations at one point. You know, he sees like a brain on the subway platform.
Right.
You know, he's totally sort of, you know, losing his grip on reality as part of the movie.
Yeah.
The other thing about Aronofsky movies, about almost all of them, is that like most movies start off with the character is normal and then they go insane, but like they're already at like a 10 most of the time. Like when you meet this character, he's already like clearly got issues, and then they just go off the deep end. I mean, everything from Black Swan to, you know, even some characters in Requiem for a Dream, you know, The Wrestler. I mean, like, they're already kind of at a point. I think it's interesting that I know it's a criticism against him, but like that some people are like, well, there's no arc, he's already insane, and then just goes bananas. And I'm kind of like, but I think that's really interesting and kind of daring for us to just introduce us to this character who's clearly already like just a brainiac to the point that it feels inevitable that he would just lose his marbles at this point.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you talk about Mother being divisive. I mean, as like a point of contrast, I mean, I guess maybe, is it divisive because of like, in Pi, it's like the guy who like thinks that he's like a chosen one and like will be able to get all the answers and like get this great thing, and he turns the destruction inwards. Like it's him that he's hurting the most at the end of the movie. Whereas Mother, it's like Javier Bardem is like the great artist who's like, you know, writing books, but like in the process, like destroying his house, his family, all his like all his loved ones in order to fuel that. I wonder if maybe that's where people are like, and maybe conflating those characters with Aronofsky, maybe that's where people,
I think, because the thing about Mother for me too, and I don't know if any of you have experienced this, but the thing was, I talked to, a lot of women who love Mother and who hate Mother, but I think the fact that she is such an innocent bystander, and it almost becomes like, it's not like a Lars von Trier film, but it kind of enters that realm of like a male director making a female protagonist suffer for 2 hours, is kind of where people get divisive about Mother, because everything is happening to her, where I feel like the camera's always on her and the camera's always empathetic to her. But as with most movies, even in something where Black Swan has a female protagonist, but it's all her doing this to herself. It's all self-harm and for the sake of achieving art. I do think that's kind of where the Mother controversies come in, because I've talked to a lot of people who think it's misogynistic, and I as a man, a cis man, I'm not going to be like, no, you're wrong. Like, I'm just going to like, kind of quietly fold at that point. I found that film to be incredibly empathetic, but I understand why, especially with the poster that we talked about, why certain people really lost it with him with that one, because Jennifer Lawrence really doesn't do anything wrong in that one, and in every other one of his movies, his protagonists, I mean, they're the makers of their own demise eventually. So
right. My initial thoughts, I've seen this about 4 or 5 times. I remember like in the early 2000s there was like Artisan put together like a box set of Pi and Requiem, and pretty sure my brother bought that, and that's how the first time I saw it, probably in like middle school or something like that. Every time I've watched it, I've enjoyed it way more. Like I said, I just love the mood and the darkness and the obsessiveness of it all, and the way it looks, and Clint Mansell's score. I'm a big fan of just movies about research and obsession and then paranoia and all of that, and it's just all of that has this, and I don't know. Very, very quick initial thoughts. Charlie?
Yeah, no, same here. I mean, I saw it right after I saw Requiem in high school, so like 2005, 2006. Yeah, I completely agree with what everyone's saying. I think it looks great. I think it's a great debut. And everything I've been saying about Aronofsky, about like, I am fascinated by these people who are just obsessives to the point of self-destruction, to the point, and I think that whether or not, I mean, I might have hinted at this before, but like his movies capture this state of just total. It's weird how they're so visceral in how they capture mental fragility in a way that I kind of fear in a way. So it feels cathartic to see people kind of obsessively like it's also like, because this is something that I'm not a math person. I'm terrible at math. I think it offers a window into a very over the top but still fascinating mindset of how everything has structure, everything is based on numbers, and like life is so not like that. And I love that it's all about this character trying to find order and chronology in something as like just vague as life, that of course the more you look for meaning, the more it's going to frustrate you and turn you inside out. So I think it's the subject matter is so right for Aaron. Like it makes sense to me how, because even if you don't like his editing choices, like Aronofsky, as messy as his movies can be, they feel so intricate in how they're cut and how they're filmed. Like he feels like a very big perfectionist, so it kind of makes it kind of almost meta in how he wants to make perfect movies about imperfect, messy, deranged people in a way that I find to be very compelling. So
yeah, and like sorry, go ahead, Brad, please.
Well, I was just gonna say, I mean, it's interesting you bring up math, where one of the big things, like, I mean, Aronofsky will tell you, and it's true, is like the movies are really about math. There's not much math in the movie, and it kind of plays like it is, but it really isn't. Like, I think what you said though is like exactly spot on. Like the idea of the movie is it's about someone trying to like put order into the universe, and it's about people that are trying to like put order into the universe, and just it's about chaos theory in that sense, and it's about sort of the idea of perhaps there is sort of a grand equation that will explain everything, that will will put an end to sort of the disorganization and randomness of the universe. And and so what better metaphor for that than like the stock market, of which there's an entire industry just dedicated to being able to try to predict it, and and it's still impossible to fully predict it, and sometimes it just moves on the strangest whims because there's no particular order. And obviously there's just volumes and volumes like written about this whole concept, but I think it's very interesting in the sense of Aronofsky kind of commented at the time where you have this black and white independent film that is kind of about it's about math, it's about mysticism and spirituality, it's about obsession, and there's comparisons to Eraserhead, there's comparisons to a lot of other cult movies, but Aronofsky basically says, like, I think he was talking to the AV Club. He says, I wrote the quote down. It's a purely commercial movie. It's the most commercial movie of the summer. You want to know why? Because the star of the movie is the ideas. Pi is just a thriller. It's a chase film. It's an adrenaline-driven. We wanted to make a roller coaster ride for 90 minutes, which is what it is. It is it's a thriller. It's a Hitchcockian kind of like thriller, like the way like this guy has something in his head that other people want, and they're chasing him for it. And it's an incredibly commercial movie. And he even said it himself. I think this is the same interview where Eraserhead comes up, or it might have been a different interview, but he said that comparison is shallow. It's not really doing the same thing at all, just because both are in black and white and about kind of, some reclusive weirdos living on their own. They're very different types of things. And I think the big key to Aronofsky in general is that, for as grotesque as his movies can get, most of them are all very commercial films. They're all very mainstream, and I think that's also why like Requiem for a Dream resonates so much, because it's pretty much like a mainstream movie. Everyone, when that came out, thought like, oh, this guy's killing his career dead, like this movie's too gruesome and weird for people to accept, but like it's not. It's kind of if Requiem for a Dream came out today, it'd be nominated for Best Picture, like without a doubt. Like it was the only reason it didn't at the time was it was just a little too graphic for 2000. Otherwise, it's an incredibly mainstream movie, and I think Pi is a fairly mainstream movie too. I think if you showed Pi to most people, they could get into it. It's plot driven. It's about the energy. It's about sort of this character on the run. The math doesn't factor into it at all. It's just numbers on a screen.
Yeah, if you played Pi for somebody, they wouldn't be like, "Oh, is this one of those art films?" Like it moves so fast, and it's you might get confused by the math and whatnot, but if you were just like, okay, I don't understand the math, you'll still get the story, and the story is obsession and paranoia and being chased and chasing people and all of that, which is in any type of thriller. So it's just it takes that just at a very different type of look and a different type of score than we're used to. But I 100%.
It's like one of Hitchcock's Wrong Man movies, like The Man Who Knew Too Much, or Saboteur, or the North by Northwest. It's a man on the run from nefarious forces. Yeah, Brian.
Definitely like the score. I mean, like we were talking about, like we thought like Massive Attack was in the movie. It wasn't, but like even like that score, like I think when we were talking about the score, maybe like in one of our group chats, we were talking about like I heard like comparisons to like Aphex Twin and like those like electronic groups.
Hell yeah.
With like those kind of beats were like being, and I'm not as familiar with that era of music, but like that was definitely like a big thing at the time. So I imagine that drawing in audiences at the time, and I feel like those groups are still like listened to this day.
Oh yeah.
And Aphex Twin rules.
And the score in this movie, it's really interesting. What I was thinking about with like, I was looking back through my notes. It's really interesting how Aronofsky melds sound effects and score in the movie. How like dripping water, like the sound of like dripping water will like start like increasing in speed and then like become its own like beat almost for like a song and everything. And that's interesting because I know Mother originally was going to be like a Johan Johansson scored movie, but then like Aronofsky like screened the movie and thought like, why do I need a score? I might as well just I could like just as easily do like a score with just like sound effects and everything by like really like cranking that up and everything. So it's really interesting to see that, to think about that evolution of how he uses sound almost like as its own form of music, and also to like heighten the atmosphere. He uses it so viscerally, and like, I mean, at one point, like I wrote down in my notes, I'm terrible with like music and everything, so I just wrote like boom boom spliff is almost kind of like the sound of one of the sounds, but it almost kind of reminded me like one of the beats. I think it's when he's running away from Marcy, the woman who keeps calling him on the phone. It almost sounds like something. This is not the same as like the bands I was mentioning, but it almost sounds kind of like a beat Joy Division would use in one of their songs, like sort of like the
sure,
like this. That's terrible impersonation or anything, but I just found it interesting. Like it's very like on like just a pure technical level, like the movie like works and like it adds to the mood. So it's like I guess it works on a couple of levels in that regard. Like just the surface pleasures, there's a lot to gain from that.
I think that's kind of why I've been such a sucker for them since I was a teenager. Is it's all of his films are so sensory. You know, it's all about images, the way the images are cut, the way certain sound effects and editing are used. I mean, and that's what puts you in this mindset. And I think that's why he drives so many people crazy, is that he basically assaults and punishes you almost every single time.
Hell yeah.
And then people, if you're not vibing with it, you're like, I want off the ride now. And it's understandable why, because sometimes depending on, I mean, I know people have mixed feelings on Requiem for a Dream if you think it's obvious, or you think that he could, because this is the other thing that I think about, is Darren Aronofsky empathetic or a sadist? You know, like, is he a bit of...
Why not both?
Both? Like, and I think that, you know, like, here, he's not even trying to make this character likable. He's, like, immediately just, like, kind of already stuck in his own head and doesn't give a shit about the rest of the world, and is so... It's funny how he's on the run, but he's always going back to his apartment. Right. You know, like, he's you know, like, even when people chase him down, he just retorts back to his apartment when it's clear that these people know where he lives. I mean, Marcy keeps showing up outside of his, like, building and being like, hi, I thought you'd get me, and calling him. So, like, he doesn't even want to really hide, like run away. He just is, like, he's so self-confident that he can pull this off. And you know, obviously, you know, his mentor talks about Icarus flying too close to the sun. There's the whole, you know, when I was 6 years old, growing up, my mom said, don't look into the sun. And then when I was 6 years old, I did. And that whole metaphor, I mean, that's like what Aronofsky's always been doing. That opening line is all of his movies all the time. And it is, I just forgot just how kind of unlikable this guy is. What a narcissistic, self-absorbed asshole he is. And I appreciate it for that the movie doesn't even try to make you acquainted with him or empathetic in any way. It's genuinely just like, this is this character's worldview. You're in it now for 80 minutes, you know, where I feel like a lot of other movies would just ease you in. And it's like, I appreciate how his movies do not behave. Even if I agree with... Oh, sorry, Brad. I was just going to say, I think you're right in that it is a commercial film, but like in some ways, but there are other ways where it's just like, you know, all of his movies are like, is your seatbelt fastened? And you're like, I mean, no, not really. And it's like, too late. Like you're in, like...
It's also about getting so obsessed that you lose sight of what you're actually trying to accomplish, which is very explicitly explained in the text, because like at one point his mentor, you know, yells at him. They have a huge fight, and his mentor yells like you're not doing math anymore. You're just a numerologist. Like you're just doing numerology.
And he clearly doesn't care. He clearly doesn't care about money. I mean, he's offered so much by Marcy. I mean, what that is kind of the fascinating thing, is what is his end game? Just knowledge? Like, what is he going to do with that knowledge once he acquires it?
Well, it's... Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's actually, yes, his character is unlikable, but I think there is something very relatable, especially like with the religion angle in the movie. I mean, the idea of like he's looking for some kind of meaning, and like it's like you can't find meaning in the world and everything. And it's like when he's like, that's why he's investing so much meaning in like numbers and everything. He thinks that he can find some sort of semblance of order. And I think that's why some people reject like religion or like don't believe in like a higher power. It's like, well, like how could I believe in someone that like lets all this horrible shit happen and everything, and all this good shit happen with like seemingly no rhyme or reason, or a rhyme or reason I can't understand and everything. Like I think there is something, as abrasive as the character is, there is something relatable to like that about on like a simple level, like of like just like, well, like I if there's no order that I can find or any reason that I can invest in living my life, what purpose do I have to live? Like I do think that there is something relatable in that regard to it. And I also I just was reading the numbers to reading my notes that I had. Is when obsessed with everything, you filter everything else out and find that thing everywhere. And I jokingly thought to myself, like, is that sort of like a dig at like how people read movies sometimes, where it's like, well, if I think this is like, I don't know, I just think that's kind of funny. I wonder if people have like maybe applied those readings to Aronofsky's movies. But anyways, I'm sorry if I'm rambling, but I think
Aronofsky likes those readings, though. I think he's very into that, and you know, it definitely get the sense that he's all about kind of like, ooh, yes, like please read into my film. I think it's interesting that you know, in the interviews again from 1998, like he keeps bringing up that he thinks it's a an anti-religion film but a pro-spirituality film, which like yeah, it's such like a 90s like I'm a secular atheist type of comment, but I get what he's saying. And so like Aronofsky, it's worth pointing out, like Aronofsky himself is you know, Jewish, raised in, I believe, Brooklyn, but always grew up secular. But part of the inspiration for the movie is in the 90s. He took a kibbutz to Israel, and he tells a story where they put him to work in a plastics factory, and it was just like terrible. He had this idea that he'd be working on an avocado farm, and then he's just in this terrible industrial plant, and he decides instead to just kind of run off and go on his own. He's backpacking across the country, and he's like, yeah, it's like, you know, I'm at the Wailing Wall, and there's, you know, sort of there's this thing about assimilated Jews where, you know, sort of the Hasidics will kind of come up to you, and because they can pick you out, and they'll basically, you know, try to you know, convert you essentially to the Orthodox you know, religion. And you know, so like they offered him like, you can stay with us for free, we'll feed you, but you just have to like come to Torah study in the morning. And he's like, yeah, dude, it's like 2 to 3 hours, it's interesting, it's cool, and then, you know, I would you know, just go off and do my thing. And so he did that for a bit, and that's a very specific influence on the depiction of the Hasidics in Pi. And it should be noted again, if you haven't seen the film and you're fine with spoilers, basically the reason that the Hasidics want Max, the protagonist in the movie, is whereas the Wall Street people think that like, oh, he's going to crack the code of the stock market and we can make all this money, they believe that the code he's working on will actually translate to reveal the true name of God, which is a big thing, and therefore, you know, help unlock the meaning of life in the universe. And so but he also rejects that, and I think what Aronofsky is getting at when he says anti-religion is, I think he dislikes the control element that he sees in organized religion, which, you know, I think is a common sentiment and a reason a lot of people turn away from religion. So I think there's that criticism going on in that plot line, but I think it is connected to a greater spirituality. And I think overall the whole idea of the spirituality is like, again, going back to the idea of unlocking sort of the order to the universe. And Max's obsession is that it's not so much that he, you know, doesn't know what he wants. I think what he wants is sort of this like peace of mind, this idea that he can like figure everything out and put it all into its rightful place. And part of it is everything is just, his whole grip on reality is disintegrating throughout the whole film until he finally just finds a way to like achieve that peace and balance, which is, you know, the ultimate goal of everything. It's just like, what you really just want is peace and balance.
Right. Yeah. Usually I'd go through the plot, but I think we've pretty much covered it, so there's no point in really doing that. But I really do want to talk about the ending and what all that says, because it's kind of intimated, maybe it actually is, but like Saul maybe had a stroke doing the exact same thing that Max is trying to do, is trying to find the meaning and patterns of Pi. And then at the ending, after all of these arguments that Brad was talking about that happens in it, is Saul has another stroke. And this is, you know, after Saul's telling him, like, leave it alone, like, I already did all this and I couldn't find it. And he just thinks, well, you didn't try hard enough. And it's just like, no, I'm trying to warn you. And then, you know, he has another stroke, maybe because he goes back into his research and then finds out that he gets right back into that headspace where he can't solve it, and that happens. But just right at the end, at his apartment, Max experiences headaches, which the pill taking in this movie obviously is doubled, tripled, quadrupled down on in Requiem. He calls it the hip hop montages, where there's very quick cutting and, you know, him taking the bolts off the doors and all of that and taking the pills. It's just very
They never tell us what those pills are. I assume there's something along the lines of Adderall or Speed, but it's interesting. I just thought about how Mother, Jennifer Lawrence, takes that yellow liquid, and we never know what that is either. So he's always got characters that are like self-medicating in some way.
Right. He has they're called cluster headaches, and because he can tell when it's about to come on and when his thumb is twitching and whatnot, and that's when he takes the medicine. But then at the end, when that starts to get really bad, and he takes out like 10 pills, and then he just doesn't want to take them because he's tired of dealing with it. But he experiences another headache, but he does not want to take his painkillers. Driven insane, he destroys part of his computer called Euclid, believing the number, the 216-digit number that Marcy is trying to get and the Hasidic Jewish people are trying to get is the cause of this. He tries to focus on the number, but after he's focusing on it, he passes out and he has a vision of himself in a white void, just repeating the numbers. This vision ends with him hugging Devi, his next door neighbor, which it's a hallucination, but it kind of shows that he's trying to, as much as he's obsessed and wants to get to the bottom of it, he's also imagining, what if he was the type of person that wasn't involved with it? Maybe I could be the type of person that could actually touch somebody else, because the only time that he's ever touched in the movie is whenever he comes out of the apartment and Debbie's like trying to fix his hair and he's just like so off put by it. Basically he burns the paper that has the number on it, and throughout of this is he's always banging on the right side of his head, which you could take as kind of a metaphor of like his right brain, like all of his creative stuff and whatnot is like getting to him while his left brain is doing all the mathematics and stuff like that. He eventually gets like a growth on the right side of his head, and basically he sees the only end is to drill right into it and just take care of the headaches, and hopefully that'll take care of all the obsession. And then it ends sometime later. If you want to read in that maybe he actually did kill himself and this is all hallucination, but I
hate those types of theories.
I know, but it's just like a movie with a lot of hallucinations. So if you read it that way, it's just like, it's not that far-fetched, but I just take it straight ahead, no pun intended. Where the girl Jenna is talking to him, who's a little girl that asks him complex math equations that he gets instantly, and she asks him what's 748 divided by 238, which is an approximation of pi, and Max smiles for the first time and says that he doesn't know the answer. So it's like he's finally at peace, just being quote unquote normal, not being obsessive, not being driven by numbers. What happens next, who knows, but he's finally beating it, or it's beating him, but either way it doesn't really matter.
And it's also interesting, I mean, I think like one of the last things he's looking at is that he's looking back at the trees, like in like the park, like on the basketball court, which is like a shot you get throughout the movie when he's like looking up at the trees while also like thinking about these numbers. And like there's an earlier scene where he takes a train out into Coney Island and he's able to like look at like shells, and like it's very quiet, very calming, like the sound of like the waves and everything. And he's like separated from technology and like his numbers for a little bit before he's sucked back in, of course. But like it's like maybe finding peace with like not just like being able to, he's at peace not solving pi, but also like he's more at peace with like nature, I guess. I don't know if that's like for the spirituality.
Well, yes,
with it, but and you also see a lot of people doing tai chi a lot, like also like getting into stuff like that sort of
It's him trying to get into nature, but he's also saying that mathematics is the learning of nature, and everything in nature can be solved by mathematics. So when he's seeing the shells, he's seeing the perfect golden ratio, which he's talking about and whatnot. So it's like, even though he's away from his computer and away from all the numbers, he can't ever get away from it if he continues down this path. So it's just like, even when he's as far away, he's at Coney Island on the beach, it's like it's still in his mind. What were you saying, Charlie?
I just think it's interesting that so many Darren Aronofsky movies end with they're either accepting the inevitable, that they will never be able to fully understand everything, accepting death, or claiming bodily autonomy through self-harm.
Yeah.
Whether that reaches your goal
Rock
or
bottom.
not.
They have to reach
but,
rock bottom. Yeah.
But like, especially, I mean, Pi, the wrestler, Black Swan, even Mother, I mean,
Requiem, Fountain.
Yeah, the Fountain, like, I mean, all of them are like, it's almost always ending with self-harm, but claiming your body as your own. And like,
that's definitely the wrestler. I don't think that's Requiem. I feel like because everyone's restricted by the end of that movie, and like institutions.
Requiem's kind of the opposite of that.
Yes, that's the inverse. But wrestler,
that's my
100%
key
is
issue
what it
with
is.
Requiem.
Yeah.
We'll get into it. But regardless, rock bottom after being so obsessive and trying for something that is unattainable. Yes.
Yeah, it's just interesting to me that, like, I'm just thinking about it now, how it's all coming back to me about how, like, people are genuinely, I mean, even in this movie, it's like people trying to claim his mind as their property or their
right,
or something that they deserve that they think can be bought out, or that they deserve to know. And it's this character being like, no, this is like, even though he's being a total arrogant, like, I am the chosen one thing, it's still his own right to choose whether or not he shares that with people. And I mean, the same thing, you know, the wrestler, like, you can't wrestle anymore or else you'll die, he, you know, pushes back against that. Black Swan is all about pushing Natalie Portman's character, pushing her body to the limits to create great art. Even Mother, if you want to look at the house as Jennifer Lawrence's embodiment of what she has, burns it down. You know, it's interesting. He's always obsessed with, we've touched upon this, self-destruction in a way that is ultimately like, he's an artist it's so fascinating because he's so idiosyncratic in the ways in which he makes movies that are all about these types of people, and you can tell he's so particular and so precise in what he wants to do, but all of his movies purposefully, like, get out of his hands in a weird way.
Right.
I think it's interesting that his first film ends with accept the mystery and know that this is not going to solve anything, and that you will literally end up, like, getting a stroke like his mentor did.
Right.
And instead, like, it's
interesting. I think you can because you can make it, because I have the comparison with Requiem for a Dream too, but One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest comes to mind, and the way that movie sort of ends with Jack Nicholson being sort of zapped into this sort of
paralyzed state.
Yeah, into this brain dead state, kind of. You know, that sort of, you know, just like goofy smile, that vacant look. I mean, that's what the you know, in that film, obviously that is, you know, horrible, and that is, you know, sort of the ending. And in this film, it's sort of the, you know, the tragicomic ending, that he does this to himself. Like, he's actually trying to achieve that type of you know, his idea of bliss is that he no longer has to think. Like, he sort of, but to do that, he kind of you know, destroys his brain, and he literally physically and figuratively, you know, destroys his identity by doing this. And so you know, it's a sad ending. It's you know, it's kind of a dark, morbid ending. You know, it's also sort of a little wryly funny in the way it is you know, actually presented. You know, where I don't think he actually, like, I don't know. It's not a happy ending because there's sort of a you know, deep morbidity to what happens. But there is also sort of that sense of like, well, what he was trying to achieve is peace, so he does this to himself in order to just, you know, have that. So, you know, the girl asks him the math problem, and he's like, I don't know, and, you know, he's sort of happy, but there is that element of like, well, he's happy, but he's, you know, just sort of happy in ignorance is the big sort of ending there. So I think it's one of those good ambiguous closing moments.
Yeah, I you know what? I want to go back on what I said about Requiem. I mean, I forgot about this even though I watched the movie this past week. I mean, the last
You
shot
love
of the
it? Is that what you're going off on?
No.
You love it now?
This isn't even a quality thing. It's like, I remember the last shot of that movie is of the fantasy. It's like, it's of like the game show embrace, where it's like, I don't think those characters are like like accepting their fates and everything, but it's like the last thing is like finding happiness in some sort of like fantasy image or like some sort of mediation and everything. I mean, like, and like with it, and like not really like trying not to maybe think about the cost of it or whatever, where like Ellen Burstyn is like in a horrible position in real life at the end of that movie, but then like she's able to like, she smiles because then it cuts to like her having the fantasy of like her embracing her son and everything. And the wrestler, the last shot, it's like him, Mickey Rourke possibly jumping to what could be his death, but the sound of cheers are there. Black Swan cuts herself. It was perfect. Fade to white, possibly, like questioning, was it worth it? And then Mother, it's like, destruction of like the house and like this guy's wife and everything. But then like it's the cycle starts all over again, and it's, she wakes up happy, but like, is it real happiness and everything? I don't know. So
is it the
yeah.
Oh, sorry. To go off what you were saying, is this the first and only film? I guess you could lump Noah into this too. But is this the only Darren Aronofsky film where the protagonist takes self-control enough to stop what he is passionate about?
Maybe.
Because I think it's interesting how all of his protagonists or characters in some way, I mean, Mother, I think you could lump in the Javier Bardem thing. He's not stopping. He's just like, no, I got to make this situation perfect. It'll work somehow. And that always leads to self-destruction after self-destruction of
I think so.
his new bride. But like, I think it's interesting that this is the one time it is self-harm what he's doing, and it is self-destructive in a way, but is it the one time where he's just like, this is too insane, I need to stop it?
Yeah.
Because every other character does not put on the brakes in every single one of his movies. Even the Fountain,
still self-destruction though. It
is.
It's not. He hasn't put an end to it. He's destroyed himself to do it.
But like,
so
I can imagine another movie like this. Like, I can imagine an ending where he just goes full on cuckoo. Like, just like it doesn't even become like linear anymore. It just becomes like the ending of 2001: A Space Odyssey with just random like images and colors and shit like that. And then he ultimately does achieve nirvana. And it's like, but it could be nihilistic in that sense of what is it? We don't know. He will never understand. It's beyond his perception of space and time or something. I don't know.
No,
like it
totally works. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut off your point. I just was.
No, you're fine. I cut you off earlier.
I think maybe to articulate my point, it's happiness is found either in fantasy or through ignorance. That's more like, I think, maybe the through line. I mean, that's the case. Fantasy in Requiem, ignorance in this, where it's like he's happy, but it's because he had to destroy a part of his brain that like, or he's like turned off part of his brain in that regard. And Black Swan and Wrestler and Mother, as I've said, like I don't know. Does that make sense as like a through line? I don't know if I'm maybe grasping at straws.
It makes total sense. Yeah. Even something like The Fountain, where it ultimately, try not to be as spoilery as possible, but it is ultimately the whole movie is about Hugh Jackman not being able to cope with the fact that his wife is dead, and he ultimately accepts death to a point where like it just becomes this surreal. I don't even know how to describe that movie. It's so bizarre. But even that is like him coming to terms with just his own demise. Whereas like he's gone too far in that movie to make anything else an outcome. Here, he does destroy himself, but he also heals himself from the madness, which is something I can't think of any other Darren Aronofsky film.
He stops it himself
consciously.
Yeah, everybody else is going until outside forces stop them. Everything in Requiem, they're not choosing to stop once they hit rock bottom, because Ellen Burstyn's character is still fantasizing about it. She's hit rock bottom, but she's not accepting that she's hit rock bottom, etc. Yeah,
or they refuse to acknowledge it. I mean, as in with the Wrestler and Black Swan, it's worth it to them. They don't care how that this will mean their downfall. In one aspect, the high of creating a spectacle with their own bodies is ultimately worth it, which I think is interesting. That this one, the body is the mind in this one, and it has to be corrupted in order for him to have any semblance of peace.
Brian,
my apologies too for spoiling the endings of some of Aronofsky's other movies that we weren't discussing. Like,
I mean, they've been out for a long time. I think that like, I don't know. We can put a tag on it or something. I don't
Darth
think it's
Vader is Luke Skywalker's father.
Oh,
how dare you!
Yeah, that's such a good Simpsons joke when they walk out of the theater and there's a line waiting to get into it for the next showing.
Soylent Green is people.
Yeah. I think that's a I think that's a good ending to the discussion. Let's just end it with final thoughts.
We have to end it before we ourselves self-destruct.
Yeah, I have a drill 5 inches from my head, so we need to stop. Final thoughts. I adore this movie. Charlie, when you were talking earlier about the people not caring about him, only wanting what's in his brain, I think that's a really great part whenever the Wall Street people at night like corner him and start beating him up, and Marcy is just screaming at him like, I don't give a fuck about you, I just want what's in your head. And she is so good in it.
That shot where she peeks under the car that he's hiding under and just goes, Max. It's like
so fun.
It's so funny and so menacing at the same time, where she's just like, what are you doing?
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, I adore this movie. I wish I wish every movie was shot on 16 reverse black and white, and the ones that aren't, just post-production it, do it somehow. I don't care. I want to see it. Charlie, final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I've liked this movie ever since I saw it as a teenager. I think it holds up. I think it is a great calling card for what Aronofsky would expand upon in even more grandiose manners later on. I think it's also, it's a blueprint for just what he's obsessed with, which are obsessives and people just driven to find purpose through, as I said before, just utterly self-sabotagical ways. So yeah, I think, if you're a sucker for paranoid thrillers and are interested in where, Darren Aronofsky first started off, I definitely think it's essential viewing.
Hell yeah. Bryden?
Yeah. Quite liked this a lot. Way more than I expected. Loved like the look and the mood of it as compared with the frantic editing and like the harsh sound design and like the jittery, like grainy black and white photography, and it just like really places you in a headspace of like a slowly more deranged character as the film goes on, and like the filmmaking just like beautifully suits that, I think. And I also had a couple of tidbits that I wanted to share from the end credits. Clint Mansell, the composer, plays the student photographer that Max is chasing down in the subway. Abraham Aronofsky, who's Darren Aronofsky's dad, and who I think makes cameos in some of his other movies, plays one of the guys dropping off a suitcase at
he's
Max's
the guy.
apartment.
He's the guy in Requiem when Ellen Burstyn's on the train, and he goes, "You're whacked." That's him.
That guy.
I didn't know that was him.
Yeah. And also, Darren Aronofsky thanks his family and also Leonardo da Vinci in the end credits, which I just thought was funny.
Yeah, hell yeah. Why
Oh
not?
my god, what a nerd.
I mean, yeah, like the computer is named after a Greek mathematician who is named as the founder. Yeah.
Now I'm just imagining Homer Simpson like going up to him and he's like, "Did you get a load of the nerd?"
If you've seen any of his movies, you know this guy's just a giant nerd.
Yeah.
It's
like,
pretty apparent.
Yeah, like Euclid, and then Devi, the next door neighbor, that's named after the goddess of Hinduism. Like, just nerd shit he's doing here, man.
Oh yeah, it's like it's. I mean, I love a good like on the nose reference like that. Sometimes it can be really obnoxious, and sometimes it can just be like, yes. Absolutely. Just name your one Indian character, Devi.
Yeah, why not? Just talk about the Fibonacci sequence for like 2 minutes. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. Just go into that. Just thank Leonardo da Vinci in your credits. And make a reference to Icarus, the one Greek myth that everyone knows. Yeah,
I was watching that. I was like, I know that. But Brad, just send us home. What is your final thoughts?
There's a strong argument to be made that this is like Aronofsky's best film, I think.
Wow.
And it's certainly his best looking film, like it's easily. Like, and that might be the advantage that puts it above the rest, is like nothing he's done since has like looked as good as this.
Have you seen The Fountain, Brad?
I haven't actually.
Yeah,
it's one of the ones I haven't seen.
The Fountain is a marvel visually. I would check that one out.
Yeah, but like, I mean, it is just like. It's the look and feel of the world that he gets so well, and I think it's I think one of the advantages is it's got that like first time filmmaker energy to it.
Yes,
like
it has that hunger.
That really carries it. yeah, it's like I think that's the big driver for this one, and like why it's so endearing is like it really has that excitement that like it's sometimes it starts to get lost after a little while with some filmmakers, and I think it really comes in full force here. That really makes me like this one. I enjoy all the little conspiracy adjacent elements of it and the sort of theoretical things, but as has been pointed out a lot, it's really not that complicated. It uses all these complicated ideas as aesthetics in order to just drive home a pretty like straightforward thriller in a really smart way.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Almost Major. Please rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes. Please follow the pod on Twitter at Almost Major to keep up to date with what movies we will be covering in the future. Myself, I can be found on Twitter and Letterboxd at Kev Bonesy. Bryden can be found on Twitter at Bryden Doyle and on Letterboxd at J Doyle. Charlie can be found on Twitter and Letterboxd at CT Nash91. Once again, thank you for listening.